Most people spend their entire lives looking outward, chasing success, chasing validation, chasing the next thing that promises to make them feel complete. And somewhere along the way, they completely lose track of the most important territory that exists, the world happening inside them. And what's fascinating is that nobody really talks about this. We have GPS systems that can navigate us across continents. We have telescopes powerful enough to see galaxies billions of light years away. But we have almost no tools, no training, and no language for exploring the vast inner landscape that determines literally everything about how we experience being alive. So today, I want to talk about something that I think is one of the most misunderstood and underexplored ideas of our time. The idea that most of what's real in your life is invisible, and that learning to navigate that invisible world, your thoughts, your character, your emptiness, your patterns, is the actual work of becoming a full human being. Let's start there. There's a question I keep coming back to lately, and it's this: why do intelligent people keep making the same mistakes? Not once, not twice, over and over again, the same relationship patterns, the same self-sabotage, the same reactions to stress, the same collapse under pressure, the same reaching for the wrong people. And the answer, I think, is that most people never actually examine the invisible rules they're operating by. They mistake the visible life, the job, the relationship, the reputation for the real life. But the real life is the one happening underneath all of that. Here's what I mean. You wake up in the morning, something has already been decided before you've spoken a single word. The mood you carry into the day, the lens through which you're going to interpret every interaction, the speed at which your thoughts are moving, the emotional residue of whatever you went to sleep thinking about. All of that was set in motion before your feet even hit the floor. That's the invisible world, and it is running the show whether you acknowledge it or not. Now let's talk about character, because I think character is one of those words we use constantly without really understanding what it means. A person of strong character can take criticism. They can sit with difficult feedback and not collapse. They can hear something uncomfortable about themselves, and instead of deflecting, instead of getting defensive, they ask, what's true in this? What can I use? Think about how rare that actually is. Most people have built elaborate fortresses around themselves, invisible walls. The moment criticism arrives, the drawbridge goes up. And because nothing can get in, nothing can change either. They're sealed off, protected, and completely stuck. But the person who can let criticism in, that person is growing. That person is reachable. That person has something genuinely strong inside them because they're not depending on the illusion of being perfect in order to feel okay about themselves. The same goes for stress. Stress is one of the most honest mirrors that exists. You can perform strength for a very long time in comfortable conditions, but put someone under real pressure, real uncertainty, real stakes, real consequences, and the mask comes off. What's actually there becomes visible. And this is not a judgment. It's an invitation, because the question isn't whether stress reveals something. It always does. The question is what you do with what gets revealed. Do you look away, or do you look closer? Here's something that I've been sitting with for a while now, and I think it's genuinely important. We are drawn to people and experiences that reflect our inner world back to us. This is uncomfortable to hear, but think about it. If you keep ending up in relationships where you feel unseen, there is something inside you that either believes you don't deserve to be seen or has learned to confuse the intensity of that feeling with something that feels like love. If you keep gravitating toward charismatic people who seem to have all the answers, it may be because somewhere inside you haven't found your own answers yet. And the certainty they project feels like relief. We don't just attract who we are, we attract what we haven't yet resolved in ourselves. And this is not something to be ashamed of. This is just how human beings work. The work, the real work, is becoming conscious of the pattern. Because you cannot change what you refuse to see. So then the question becomes, how do you see it? And I think this is where most self-help content gets it completely wrong. The usual answer is some variation of just think more positively, just set better intentions, just choose differently. But that advice skips the most critical step. You have to understand where the pattern comes from before you can genuinely move beyond it. Think about your beliefs, the ones that feel like facts, the ones you don't even question because they seem as obvious as gravity. Things like, I'm not naturally disciplined, or people always leave, or I have to earn love, or success is for other people, not for someone like me. Where did those come from? Somewhere, at some point, something happened, something was said, something was modeled, something was repeated enough times that your mind turned it into a rule. And now that rule is invisible. It's part of the architecture. It's shaping every decision you make without you realizing it. The practice of questioning your beliefs, genuinely, seriously, not as a thought experiment, but as a lived discipline, is one of the most powerful things a human being can do. Ask yourself, is this actually true? Or is this something I was handed and I never thought to give it back? Now I want to talk about emptiness because I think emptiness gets a bad reputation. We live in a culture that is terrified of emptiness. Every waking moment is filled. Notifications, noise, content, commentary, stimulation layered on stimulation. We have built an entire civilization around the project of never having to sit with an empty moment. And I understand why. Emptiness is uncomfortable. When the noise goes quiet, things surface. Feelings you've been outrunning, questions you've been avoiding, a sense of not quite knowing who you are underneath all the business. But here's what the most contemplative traditions across thousands of years have all understood, and what our culture seems to have completely forgotten. Emptiness is not a problem to be solved. It's a territory to be explored. There is something genuinely profound about sitting with not knowing, about letting your mind settle the way sediment settles at the bottom of a glass of water when you stop shaking it, about discovering that beneath all the noise, beneath all the thoughts and the plans and the anxieties, there is something remarkably still. And in that stillness, things become clearer. Not because you figured everything out, but because you stopped adding more confusion on top of the confusion that was already there. The mind is a fascinating thing to observe. Most people live inside their minds without ever actually studying them. They assume that whatever their mind produces is reality, that every thought is a message, every worry is a warning, every narrative their inner voice generates is the truth. But what if that's not right? Here's a simple thing to try. Just sit quietly for 5 minutes and watch what your mind does. Don't try to control it. Don't try to make it behave. Just watch. What you'll notice almost immediately is that your mind is not waiting for your input. It's already running. Thoughts are arriving uninvited. Memories surface for no apparent reason. Anxious spirals begin without any external trigger. Your mind is producing content constantly, compulsively, the way a machine produces output, not because you asked it to, but because that's what it does. Now, here's the insight that changes everything. You are not those thoughts. You are the one noticing them. There is a difference, a profound life changing difference between you and the machinery of your own mind. And the moment you genuinely understand that, something shifts. Because if you are not your thoughts, then you are not obligated to believe every thought. You are not required to follow every impulse. You are not trapped by every narrative your mind constructs about who you are and what's possible for you. Thoughts are more like weather than like laws. They pass through, they change. And you get to decide how much weight to give them. Now, let's talk about purpose. Because I think this is where everything we've discussed comes together. There is a version of purpose that most people chase, the version that looks impressive, the version that earns approval, the version that fits neatly into the story your parents had for you, or your culture had for you, or that you believe will make other people finally take you seriously. And then there is the version that is actually yours. The difference between those two things is not always obvious. And finding your way from the first to the second is usually not a linear process. It's a process of subtraction, of slowly stripping away what was handed to you. The expectations, the programming, the voices that became so familiar you started to mistake them for your own until you reach something that feels undeniably real. And when you find it, you'll know, not because it's loud or dramatic, but because of a quality of recognition, like remembering something you somehow already knew. It might be something you've been quietly drawn to since you were a child that you learned to dismiss as impractical. It might be a way of thinking, a way of connecting with people, a way of seeing the world that comes so naturally to you that you stopped counting it as anything special. It might be something you do freely, enthusiastically, without anyone asking you to, that you've never thought to call a gift. That thing, that quiet, persistent, often overlooked thing, is almost always closer to your real purpose than the grand ambitions you perform for an audience. There's a concept I've been thinking about a lot, and I want to share it with you because I think it's genuinely beautiful. The idea of an inner sky. We live in an age obsessed with outer space, with exploration, with discovering what lies beyond the edges of what we can currently see. And there's something wonderful about that. That curiosity, that drive to expand into the unknown is one of the most distinctly human things about us. But the same vast, unmapped, endlessly complex territory exists inside you. Your consciousness, your inner world, the dimension of experience that no telescope can see and no algorithm can map. And we treat it as though it's the least interesting thing about us. We scroll, we consume, we perform, we optimize our productivity and track our habits and measure our outcomes. But we rarely just sit and explore. We rarely ask, what is actually happening inside me right now? Not what should be happening, not what I want to be happening, but what is genuinely, honestly, actually present in this moment. That question, asked with real curiosity and real patience, is where the most important discoveries happen. Let me bring this back to something practical. Everything I've talked about today, the invisible patterns, the character revealed under pressure, the beliefs that run your life from underground, the emptiness that holds something valuable, the mind that you are not identical to, the purpose that is more like remembering than inventing, all of it points in the same direction, inward. Not as a withdrawal from the world, not as an escape from responsibility or relationship or the demands of a real life, but as the foundation that makes everything else more grounded, more genuine, more sustainable. Because here's what I've observed: people who haven't done this inner work, who haven't asked the hard questions, who haven't sat with the emptiness, who haven't examined the patterns, they tend to be very busy, very productive sometimes, but also very reactive. They mistake motion for direction. They're always responding to the outside world because they haven't built anything stable on the inside. And people who have done the work imperfectly, incompletely, cyclically, because this is never a before and after process, it's always ongoing. Those people have something that is harder to see and harder to measure, but unmistakably present. They have a quality of groundedness, of knowing at some fundamental level who they are and what actually matters to them. And that quality is what makes everything else, relationships, work, creativity, even ordinary daily life, feel less like a performance and more like an actual life. So here is what I want to leave you with today. The most important exploration you will ever undertake is not external. The most interesting territory you will ever encounter is not somewhere you have to travel to, not something you have to achieve, not a version of yourself that exists on the other side of some future milestone. It is here. It is now. It is the invisible world that has been running quietly beneath the surface of your entire life. And it is waiting for you to pay attention, not because paying attention will make everything easy. It won't. The questions get harder the more honestly you ask them. And the discomfort increases before it decreases. The uncertainty becomes more visible, not less, as you start to see clearly. But here is the thing about genuine self-knowledge, about real character, about a life built from the inside out. It is the only thing that actually holds. When the pressure increases, it holds. When the circumstances change, it holds. When people misunderstand you, when you fail publicly, when the things you counted on disappear, what holds is not your reputation or your achievements or anyone else's opinion of you. What holds is the quality of the relationship you have built with yourself. That relationship is worth every uncomfortable question, every difficult silence, every moment of genuine, honest self-examination. Start there and see what becomes possible.